Steve Cunningham versus Antonio Tarver. This is a fight that's actually got quite a bit of stick, and I guess on face value you can see why. I mean, Antonio Tarver is a guy who's known as a light heavyweight. Steve Cunningham is a guy who's known as a cruiserweight. They're two guys who are very much in the autumn of their careers. I think Steve Cunningham is 38, 39, nearly coming up to 40, whereas Antonio Tarver is way past that landmark. I forget exactly how old he is, but something telling me he's 47 years old. So people are saying that this reflects how poor the modern heavyweight division is. You've got two non-heavyweights, you've got two guys who between them are 85 or something years old, and they're fighting in a relevant fight in the heavyweight division. They're saying that's how a poor reflection on the division as a whole. And I can see that argument to an extent. However, I do not dislike this fight. In fact, let me go one step further than that. I do like this fight. I find it an enjoyable matchup. I find it a tough puzzle to crack. I find it hard to pick a winner. And it's one that I will be watching with great interest. I think both of these guys, there's an argument to be said that in certain circles, both of these guys are actually underrated at heavyweight. I've done videos in the past where I've said that Steve Cunningham, in my mind, is certainly a top 10 heavyweight in the current division. And let me just tell you briefly why I like both guys. I mean, Steve Cunningham, he's had a hard run since he came to the heavyweight division. He had a controversial loss to Thomas Adamek, where many felt that he won. He had a controversial loss to Kasar Glazkov, which many thought that he won. And he had, again, a controversial loss to Tyson Fury, where most would agree Cunningham was ahead in the cards. Yeah, I'm Tyson Fury's biggest fan, but you've got to be honest. You've got to be, objective here. That knockout was controversial. You could suggest that Tyson Fury fouled Steve Cunningham in order to get that knockout. My point is that Steve Cunningham's had a pretty unfortunate run at heavyweight. He's actually beaten some decent level opponents. Nothing exceptional, but decent level. He went out and he beat Natu Visinia, who was an unbeaten heavyweight, who outweighed him by like 100 pounds. He went out and beat Amir Mansour, who was an unbeaten heavyweight known for knocking everyone out. And Amir Mansour is still very highly rated. And then he had these wins that were losses against Glazkov, against Adamek. If one or two of those had gone the other way, we could be talking about a guy here at the very top of the heavyweight division. My point is, despite the losses, Steve Cunningham is still in the mix. He went 12 rounds with Glazkov. He went 12 rounds with Adamek. He was beating Tyson Fury. Even though his record doesn't have an O on it, like Floyd Mayweather, he's still very much in the mix. And in terms of the style, and what he brings to the table, there's again a lot to like about Cunningham. He's an active fighter, he can move, he's athletic, he's got a jab, he's a sort of disciplined, sort of classic amateur style fighter, I guess. Not, maybe saying amateur fighter is wrong, but we're talking about a guy who circles, who throws a jab, he doesn't brawl. He's not like a low-level heavyweight who's just a pub fighter. He's more sophisticated, more educated than that. He's actually got a very good chin. I know the Tyson Fury knockout, again, was controversial, but you don't really see Steve Cunningham getting sparked out in fights. He's tough, he's durable, he's athletic. And yes, he is small for a heavyweight. He is small. But he comes to the ring, let's say 205, 210, and it's 210 pounds of pure function. There isn't an ounce of fat on Steve Cunningham. He's 210 pounds of boiled down athlete. That's how I view him anyway. So whilst he is very small for a heavyweight, and whilst I'm sure he could still make the cruiserweight limit if he trained correctly for it, and if he had the desire to get down to that weight, I personally do believe that in the current heavyweight division he offers something different. And the way he fights does make him competitive at a semi-elite level. Let's talk Antonio Tarver. He's possibly the bigger man in this fight. I've seen him coming in 220, 230 to fights. But I think unlike Steve Cunningham, this guy is a guy who fought at an even lower weight division, light heavyweight. And whilst Tarver is a big guy, whilst I'm sure his walk-around weight would be heavyweight at this age, 47, we've got to be honest, he's not in the most athletic condition, so we say at the minute. You know, this is a guy who is showing up to fights visibly carrying a spare tyre, who is showing up to fights visibly showing signs of age and showing signs of poor condition and potentially poor discipline outside the ring. Tarver has really adapted his game for the heavyweight division. You know, I mean, who's he fought in the heavyweights? I think it's Mike Shepherd and Jonathan Banks. So he hasn't fought the highest level of competition. But being frank with you, I picked Jonathan Banks to beat him when they fought. I thought Banks would be too young, and I just didn't think Tarver would really be the same fighter at heavyweight. And of course, he isn't the same fighter who beat Roy Jones Jr. all those years ago. He's aged, he's adapted, he's different. But what he brings to the table is like a sort of very, very skilled chess player type mentality. You know, I see Tarver fighting with angles. I see him using timing. I see him, you know, that punch he took Jonathan Banks out with. He still carries some decent pop. And at the weights, you know, obviously he's been draining himself to make weight. Perhaps his power is good at heavyweight. You know, I'm not saying he's going to be like a Vladimir Klitschko or a Deontay Wilder style puncher necessarily. But even at 47 years old, the angle, the timing and the power is all there. And I think it becomes an interesting matchup between two veterans stylistically. I think you've got the sort of chess player type mentality of Antonio Tarver. I think Tarver's going to be low volume. I think he's going to be waiting to counterpunch, waiting to spot gaps, waiting to see mistakes. And then he's going to strike. And when he strikes, he's going to strike hard despite his age. Whereas I think Steve Cunningham is possibly going to be a higher output guy. He's possibly going to show more athleticism. He's possibly going to look like the better conditioned fighter. I see him circling Tarver. I see him throwing a consistent jab. I see him trying to, you know, win the fight on output. I guess this is the way I'm viewing this fight, and how it may break down would not be dissimilar to a heavyweight version of a Paulie Malignaggi versus an Adrian Broner, with Paulie Malignaggi being Steve Cunningham, you know, a guy who Steve Cunningham's probably not going to hurt Antonio Tarver. He's probably not going to knock Antonio Tarver out. He's probably not going to land the most eye-catching punch you remember. But what he will do is consistently be active and consistently throw that jab, move, have a high work rate and do the basics right. Antonio Tarver is like Adrian Broner, just 35 years older. Tarver probably will be landing the eye-catching shots. Tarver probably will be the one who can hurt his opponent. But the question is, will the output be there? Against a slightly higher level of opposition than he's faced before at heavyweight, will the power be as much as it appeared to be against Mike Shepherd and Jonathan Banks? Those are the questions, because, you know, Antonio Tarver undeniably has the power angle in this fight. You know, he's the hard hitter in this fight. However, you know, as I've already mentioned, Cunningham's in shape, he's durable, and the opposition that Tarver's been taking out at heavyweight hasn't quite been at the level of Steve Cunningham. So I view this one as a very, very interesting fight. I view it really as a 50-50. I understand that Steve Cunningham is like the archetypal opponent. You know, he's brought in, you know, to lose, isn't he? He's brought in as the, you know, Glazkov brought him in so Glazkov could look good against him, as did Tyson Fury, as did Adamek, as did Amir Mansour. You know, but sometimes this guy can upset you, and even if he doesn't take the win, he can make you look very bad in a fight, like he did against Glazkov, for example. And I think it's another case here. You know, Tarver's the marketable guy. Tarver's the guy who could potentially earn a lot of money for his people. Tarver's the guy who you could more realistically see getting a big money fight in the heavyweight division against one of the champions. And I think realistically, Tarver's the one who's got something of a winning streak, whereas you know, Steve Cunningham has had a few losses recently. Putting all of that aside, in what I view to be a very, very close fight, I'm going to slightly lean to Steve Cunningham. Now, I think it's very, very hard to knock Steve Cunningham out. I really do. Tyson Fury did it, but, you know, Tyson Fury is clearly a natural heavyweight, whereas Antonio Tarver isn't. And Tyson Fury's knockout, and I'm not being, I am Tyson Fury's biggest fan, but it was a dubious knockout, wasn't it? The way he raised Cunningham's head and sort of threw a hook on it, it was bordering foul play. And I'm probably being charitable when I use the word bordering there. Cunningham doesn't go down easily. Cunningham doesn't get knocked out, is what I'm trying to say, typically. And I don't think an overweight Antonio Tarver, aged 47, who's knocked out two lower level opponents in the heavyweight division, is necessarily going to knock Cunningham out. I give Tarver a puncher's chance. He does hit hard. He is very experienced. He has got a knack of finding the right time to throw that big punch. So I don't rule out the knockout, but my gut is this will go 12. I don't think Tarver will find a knockout, and I don't think Cunningham will have the ability to hurt Tarver, unless Tarver gets old overnight, or Tarver just gets so gassed later on in the fight that he's easy to stop. But yeah, whilst no outcome in this fight is a certainty, I'd be inclined to go for a 12-round decision here. The way I look at it, the age, I know both men are old, but the difference between being 38, 39 and 47 is massive. I know both men are overweight, are fighting out of their natural weight divisions, but the difference between a cruiserweight fighting at 205 and a light heavyweight fighting at 225, again, is vast. I think if this one goes rounds, things like stamina, athleticism, fitness will come into it. And I see Steve Cunningham being the high output fighter. I see him being the well-conditioned fighter. And in a close fight, I think that may be enough to take the rounds. I think if this fight gets to round 10 or 11, I mean, when was the last time Antonio Tarver did that? Especially, he's never done it at heavyweight. Age 47 with that spare tyre, what will he have in those rounds? Whereas we know Steve Cunningham will still be there pumping that jab and, scoring points. Very close fight, no outcome would surprise me. I don't rule out the stoppage. Slight lean here, Steve Cunningham on points. I'm looking forward to this fight. I appreciate it maybe isn't the best advertisement for the heavyweight division. Stylistically, it's very interesting. For me, it's a hard fight to break down. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give me a like, thumbs up the video. Leave your comments below. Who do you think is going to win? Are you interested by this fight, or is it a terrible advertisement for the heavyweight division? Thanks.